spending gap between the parties has rarely, if ever, been as big as it is today. Look at these key battleground states where the situation for Republicans is so stark. Look at those numbers. Pro-Harris groups are spending roughly 10 times as much as pro-Trump groups in buying political ads in Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, and Wisconsin. 3 times as much in the state of Arizona. And that's all according to political data analysis from the firm Ad Impact, which tallies these ad buys on television. That is a colossal spending disparity you're seeing right there. It's the kind that might make a difference in a tight election, right? There are, however, 2 swing states where, despite their huge disadvantage right now in fundraising, Republicans are keeping pace with Democratic spending. And I think this tells you something about where this race is going to come down to. So those would be the states of Georgia and Pennsylvania. Look at those numbers, right? So in those states, pro-Trump groups seem prepared to be outspent everywhere else that's in play, but not in Georgia or Pennsylvania, where they're matching pro-Harris spending almost dollar for dollar. Now, the reason, of course, for this is the Electoral College, the bizarre anti-democratic system of presidential voting that says no matter how many people vote for you for president, you still need 270 state electors. It's a system that's already caused enormous problems in America, like when George W. Bush and Donald Trump both lost the popular vote but won the Electoral College. And of course, don't forget that in 2020, it was the perverse incentives and the complicated machinery of the Electoral College that provided Trump with the opening to try and steal the election with, among other things, his plan for fake electors, a plan that culminated in the January 6th insurrection, right? That was the day that the Electoral College votes were going to be tallied, right? The Electoral College is still there. It's in the Constitution, operating in the background, and every single strategic decision both campaigns make are determined by it. And what you're seeing in the spending of the Trump campaign, I think, they've got one main path to victory that they appear to be putting literally all their money on. And that is basically this map. Envision this result. It's pretty much the same as 2020, except so everybody holds the states their parties won that year in 2020, except Donald Trump flips 2 states. He flips Georgia, which, of course, Joe Biden famously won by 11,000 votes, and he flips Pennsylvania. That gives him 270 electoral votes to 268 for Kamala Harris. Under that scenario, Trump becomes president again. Kind of a nightmare map for the Democrats, to be honest. Harris could sweep the rest of the battleground states, and she could win nationwide by millions of votes. 4 million votes, 5 million votes, 6 million votes, wouldn't matter. As the Washington Post pointed out today, if Trump can hold North Carolina, the only one of these 7 states he won in both 2016 and 2020, and he takes Georgia and Pennsylvania, that's it. He wins. It's over for Harris. Now, that path, that map, is a high-risk, high-reward strategy for Republicans. And again, the reason we're talking about this specific path is that ad spending we showed you at the top of the block, right? But what's very clear is that Pennsylvania is like just absolutely crucial, pivotal for them, as you might have gathered from Trump's last few rallies there.
When I'm back in the White House, America's future will be built right here in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is always a big factor. We've had great success, as you know, politically and otherwise in Pennsylvania. The workers of Pennsylvania, 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 Pennsylvania. This is a very consequential vote in Pennsylvania because they say that if you win Pennsylvania, you're going to win the whole thing. We cannot let these people win Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania is almost as crucial for Harris as well. Certainly if she wins there, right now she leads in the polls, but it's within the margin of error. And of course, I think it's fair to say all these states are going to be very close. If she wins there, she's in good shape. She can also win in some long shot scenarios without Pennsylvania. For example, she can hold Georgia and then flip North Carolina, which again, a Democrat hasn't won for quite some time. But for both campaigns right now, the Keystone State looks like a true keystone to victory. And that's also borne out in the campaign visits this week. Harris and President Biden rallied in Pittsburgh on Labor Day, with the campaign saying Harris will return there on Thursday. Harris's running mate, Tim Walz, is beginning his own solo trip to multiple parts of the state of Pennsylvania, including Lancaster, on Wednesday. Even Doug Emhoff, first gentleman, is expected to campaign in Allentown, Pennsylvania this week. Trump, meanwhile, is expected in Harrisburg tomorrow to film a town hall with Sean Hannity of Fox News, of course. Beyond that, he has no major public campaign stops scheduled for this week. I'm joined now by NBC national political correspondent Steve Kornacki here at the desk. Steve, good to see you. You getting ready? 63 days from now, like you got your physical stamina built up. I found that spending data pretty fascinating and indicative of where they see the race. What did you think?
Yeah, and also, like you said, the importance of Pennsylvania and how direct that path is. You hold North Carolina if you're Trump, less than 12,000 votes in Georgia, and then they got Pennsylvania, and they think there's some opportunities there in Pennsylvania, and maybe a missed opportunity for the Democrats in not putting Josh Shapiro on the ticket. So you put it that way, you could see the interest. But I think from both campaign standpoint, the one thing I think to keep in mind is that in either case, if you lose Pennsylvania, it's the largest of the swing states for electoral votes. It has 19 of them. You know, Georgia's 16, Carolina is 16, Michigan is 15. So if you want to offset a loss in Pennsylvania, it requires two other battleground states. That's basically,
right.
That's the importance
That's the key math. Yeah,
right.
Let's just look at this, the Trump 270 map, which we were showing before. So if you've got Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, right? If he doesn't win those, but he does manage to win Pennsylvania, flips Georgia, and holds North Carolina. That's that narrow 270, 268 path.
Right. And from Harris's standpoint, too, if she were to get Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and nothing else, she's at exactly 270 as well.
Right.
And again, if she loses Pennsylvania, she's got to offset it with two from those Sun Belt states. So it's the first among equals when you talk about these swing states.
You know, one of the nightmare scenarios that have been keeping me up at nights, but I don't think is a possibility anymore or likely, was when Biden was in the race, and it really looked like he was going to have to kind of hold that blue wall. His polling in Nevada looked really bad. And to the extent they were polling that single congressional district around Omaha and Nebraska, too, it looked like he had a shot at that. He had a shot at holding the blue wall, even losing Nevada, even losing Arizona, even losing Georgia, holding that one congressional district and just getting 270. And I worried about what that would mean, you know, afterwards, pressure on Nebraska lawmakers, et cetera, like that. That narrow path seemed a little different now that Nevada seems to be polling in a different way.
Yeah, although Nevada is always, you know, they always say notoriously difficult, you know,
yes.
a state to poll there. And there's always been demographically opportunity for Republicans in Nevada because you have that huge rural, you know, blue-collar white population there that's been trending so Republican. But yeah, look, Harris has made strides with non-white voters, Hispanic voters in particular, young Hispanic voters. This is where there was the biggest slack with Biden. Where are you going to find voters like that in the battleground? Less likely you're going to find them in a Wisconsin, you know, Michigan, Pennsylvania. More you're going to find them in those Sun Belt states. So there's more opportunity for the Democrats down there. But that being said, you know, again, Biden winning Georgia, that's the first time a Democrat had won that state since 1992, and it was by just under 12,000 votes. Arizona was basically 10,000 votes. So these are extremely narrow margins that Biden took these states by. And there is a pull of sort of, you know, political history there that keeps these states very winnable for Republicans.
Totally. Now, there's two aspects about those states, Arizona and Georgia, that I think are interesting. Because something you've been talking about in sort of as you've been briefing all of us, right, is about, you know, there's the polling, right? But then there's the kinds of people living in the kinds of places they are and the kinds of voting groups Democrats do better with in the Trump era versus Republicans. One of the things that sort of characterizes Georgia and Arizona is just enormous metro areas as a share of total vote for the state, right? So that Georgia, that Atlanta area, that Phoenix area, as Democrats have done better in metro areas, including out into the suburbs, that's been a richer pool of votes for them and part of the math that allowed them to pull off 2020.
Well, right. The metropolitan areas, cities and really metropolitan areas, suburbs that are fast growing, too. Yes. That's what you're talking about there. You know, the Atlanta metro area, extremely fast growing. And that's where the Democrats, you have counties there that Democrats were losing, you know, by 30 points, you know, say 20 years ago.
Mitt Romney even won by enormous
2012,
amounts.
That they can now win. They can now win by double digits. You've got, you know, they're rapidly diversifying. They're filling with Democratic-friendly demographics. So you've got that in Georgia. They've got that in Arizona. North Carolina is another interesting one in the battleground because that sort of exists for Democrats. You know, the Research Triangle, you know, talking about the Raleigh-Chapel Hill area. You talk about it in Mecklenburg County where Charlotte is. You've got that if you're a Democrat. But if you're a Republican, you look at North Carolina and you say, well, the Democrats have been flexing their muscle in those metro areas. Trump has been driving up bigger margins, you know, in rural counties across the state. And not just rural counties, some mid-sized counties as well. Because I think, relatively speaking, there's a larger blue-collar white, non-college white population there as a share of the electorate in North Carolina.
Yeah, those sort of offsetting trends, which we've seen in election after election night, midterm. You see it in Texas, too, where like those metro areas, I mean, Harris County, Democrats winning Harris County 12 years ago was like crazy. Obviously, Democrats now they win Harris County pretty reliably. They're now in around the Dallas suburbs doing much better than they were 12 years ago. But those margins in those rural areas in Texas they're going from 65-35 to 75-25 to 80-20.
And you see that, across the battleground. We can talk about a state like Wisconsin, too. The suburbs outside Milwaukee are still Republican suburbs.
Yeah.
A lot of other suburbs around the country have gone. But the same thing is happening there. They're becoming less Republican. So it's hurting Republicans what's happening in the suburbs. But, again, in Wisconsin, Trump has offset a lot of that. He offset all of it in 2016 when he won the state. And he came within 20,000 votes in 2020. He nearly offset it in the rest of the state. And that's something else I think Democrats have to worry about right now. When you look at the polling, it's close in all these battlegrounds, but this was true of Biden and it's true of Harris right now. Her best numbers in these battlegrounds tend to be coming from Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, let's see some more polls out of there. But we saw that with Biden in 20, and we're seeing that with Harris now. And the biggest misses in the polling in 20, and for that matter in 16, demographically, it's been with non-college white voters, and they're in abundance in those states in particular.
Right. Now, there's a question about whether they've adjusted properly,
As there was in 2020.
Right. And then, but everyone's been doing a lot of work on this, right? There's a real question about...
But if you can't adjust for non-response bias at a certain point, and that's the ultimate question here, because if you can take every precaution you want to say we need just the right number of non-college white folks in our survey to be demographically representative, but there are non-college white voters who will vote Democratic, and if the Republican ones aren't answering the phone and won't talk to you, you're going to get the Democratic ones in that effort.
Right. If the variable you're selecting on is I don't want to talk to you because I'm voting for Donald Trump, essentially, you can't model your way out of that poll. It's very difficult to model your way out of that poll.
And we won't. And so I think that's the asterisk that comes with every poll, particularly from those states. Because this wasn't, if you looked at 2020.
And this wasn't a problem in other places. Georgia polling was incredibly good. We should say about Georgia polling, in a bunch of different races that were very close, Georgia polling held up pretty well.
Right. No, this is something, Wisconsin, there was the famous poll, I think in October 2020, that had Biden up by 17 points. And he wins the state by a fraction of a point in the end. And we saw that in 16 as well. So that's every poll you see from those states, I think. That's the asterisk that comes with it. And, of course, we won't know till election night.
Or 4 days after?
Or Wisconsin was a pretty quick.
Yeah, that was at 3 a.m. All right, Steve Kornacki, it's great to have you here. We'll do this again.
Sounds good.
A lot more. Still to come, polls show Kamala Harris gaining ground on one of Trump's go-to issues. Senator Chris Murphy joins me on why that is next.
At Public.com, you can grow your savings at 5.1% APY with our new high-yield cash account. There are no maintenance fees, no balance requirements, and no transfer or withdrawal limits. And by the way, you don't need a subscription either. Put your cash to work and earn 5.1% APY with no strings attached. All of the interest, none of the fees. Public.com.
Saturday, September 7th, Brooklyn, New York. It's MSNBC Live Democracy 2024, our premier live audience event. Maddow, Psaki, Mitchell, Reed, Hayes, Steele, Menendez, Sanders-Townsend, O'Donnell, Wagner, Rule, Melber, Kornacki, and more. Join the MSNBC community in conversation. Visit msnbc.com/democracy2024 to buy your tickets today.